David stood in front of his bathroom mirror, running his hands through his hair. The person looking back at him felt like a stranger. 18 months ago, he could barely fit through his apartment door. Now the man in the reflection looked completely different. He remembered that morning when everything changed. The doctor had looked at him with serious eyes and said the words that shook his world. If you don't make changes now, you might not see your next birthday. That was the wake-up call he needed but never wanted to hear. Back then, David weighed over 300 pounds. He wore the biggest clothes he could find and always sat in the back row of meetings. He ate his lunch alone at his desk while his co-workers went out together. Every morning was a struggle just to get out of bed. His knees hurt, his back ached, and climbing stairs left him breathless. But today was different. Today, he weighed less than half of what he used to. The loose skin reminded him of his journey, but his body felt strong and alive. He could run upstairs without stopping. He could shop in regular stores. He could look people in the eye without feeling ashamed. The change didn't happen overnight. It took months of small steps. First, he started walking around his block. Just once around made him tired, but he kept going. Then he began changing what he ate. Instead of 3 burgers, he had a salad. Instead of soda, he drank water. Every small choice added up to something bigger. The hardest part wasn't the physical changes. It was learning to see himself differently. For years, he had told himself he wasn't worth the effort. He believed he would always be the big guy in the corner that nobody noticed. Changing his mind was harder than changing his body. His old clothes hung in his closet like ghosts of who he used to be. Sometimes he would touch them and remember how it felt to hide inside all that fabric. Those clothes had been his armor, protecting him from a world that often wasn't kind to people like him. Now he wore clothes that actually fit. Shirts that showed he had a shape underneath. Pants that didn't need to be held up by extra strong belts. When he walked down the street, people looked at him differently. Cashiers smiled at him. Waiters made eye contact. It was like he had become visible for the first time in years. But with this new visibility came new fears. What if people from his past saw him? What would they think? Would they even recognize him? Part of him hoped they wouldn't. His old life felt like a movie he had watched about someone else. David picked up his phone and scrolled through old photos. There he was at his cousin's wedding 2 years ago, standing at the back, trying to hide behind other people. His face was so puffy that his eyes looked tiny. His smile seemed forced, like he was apologizing for taking up space in the picture. He compared that photo to the one his neighbor had taken of him last week while they were fixing her fence. In the new picture, he stood tall and confident. His smile was real, his eyes were bright and full of life. It was like looking at 2 completely different people. The transformation had cost him more than just weight. He lost some friends who didn't understand his new lifestyle. They wanted him to be the same person who would eat pizza and watch movies all weekend. When he started saying no to unhealthy activities, some people stopped calling. But he also gained things he never expected. Energy that lasted all day. Confidence to speak up in meetings. The courage to try new things. He had started taking cooking classes and joined a hiking group. He even signed up for salsa dancing lessons, something the old David would never have imagined doing. His apartment looked different too. Gone were the reinforced chairs and the special cushions that helped support his weight. His bathroom scale, which he used to avoid looking at, now sat proudly in the corner. His refrigerator was full of fresh vegetables and lean proteins instead of frozen dinners and leftover takeout. The mirror in his bedroom had been covered with a sheet for years. He couldn't stand to see his whole body reflected back at him. Last month, he had finally taken the sheet down. Now he looked at himself every morning, not with shame but with pride for how far he had come. People at work barely recognized him. His boss had to look twice when David walked into meetings. Coworkers who used to ignore him now stopped to chat in the hallway. The security guard at the front desk asked if he was new to the company. Sometimes David felt guilty about how differently people treated him now. The same personality that people ignored before was suddenly interesting. The same sense of humor that fell flat in the past now made people laugh. It made him realize how much the world judges people by how they look. But he tried not to be bitter about it. Instead, he used his experience to be kinder to others who might be struggling like he once did. He noticed the quiet person in meetings and made sure to include them. He smiled at people who looked uncomfortable in their own skin. As David got ready for another day, he thought about his future. For the first time in years, it felt bright and full of possibilities. He had proven to himself that he could change anything if he was willing to work for it. The man in the mirror wasn't just thinner. He was stronger, braver, and more alive than he had ever been. Today felt special, though he couldn't say why. Something in the air suggested that life was about to surprise him again, and this time he felt ready for whatever came next. David pushed open the glass door of his favorite coffee shop on Tuesday morning. The little bell above chimed softly, and the familiar smell of fresh coffee and pastries filled his nose. This place had become his regular spot over the past few months. The staff knew his order by heart now: black coffee with a splash of almond milk and 1 sugar. As he walked toward the counter, he felt good about himself. His new jeans fit perfectly, and his button-down shirt actually showed that he had a shape underneath. 6 months ago, he would have worn a baggy hoodie and tried to blend into the background. Today, he walked with confidence. The morning rush was in full swing. Business people checked their phones while waiting in line. A mom juggled her purse and a toddler who kept pointing at the cookies behind the glass. Students with laptops claimed tables by the window. David joined the line behind a woman in a navy blazer who was scrolling through emails on her phone. Then he saw her. She was standing near the pickup counter, waiting for her order. Even after 3 years, he recognized her immediately. Lisa from his old accounting job, the woman who had always been kind to him when others weren't, the one who used to ask how his weekend went and actually seemed interested in the answer. David's heart started beating faster. Lisa looked exactly the same: shoulder-length brown hair, bright smile, always dressed professionally, but with small touches that showed her personality. Today she wore colorful earrings that caught the light when she moved her head. He remembered so many moments with her. The time she invited him to join the team lunch when everyone else had forgotten to ask him. The way she would stop by his desk just to chat about weekend plans or funny things her cat had done. She had this laugh that made everyone around her feel lighter. Lisa had been the highlight of his workdays back then. Not just because he had feelings for her, though he definitely did, but because she treated him like a real person. While others saw him as the quiet, heavy guy who kept to himself, she saw someone worth talking to. David had left that job about 6 months into his transformation journey. The stress of his old life was too much, and he needed a fresh start somewhere new. He had often wondered what happened to Lisa and whether she ever thought about him. Now here she was, just 15 feet away from him. The barista called out an order. "Medium latte with oat milk for Lisa." She walked forward to collect her drink, and David got a better look at her face. She looked happy and relaxed, probably heading to work like any other Tuesday morning. As Lisa turned to leave, her eyes swept across the coffee shop. David held his breath. Would she recognize him? Part of him desperately wanted her to. Part of him was terrified that she would. Her gaze passed right over him without stopping. Not even a flicker of recognition. She looked at him the same way she would look at any stranger, polite but distant. There was no spark of memory in her eyes, no sudden smile of recognition. David felt his stomach drop. It was like being invisible all over again, but in a completely different way. Before, people didn't notice him because of how he looked. Now someone who had known him didn't notice him because of how much he had changed. Lisa walked toward the door, sipping her latte and checking her phone. She was about to leave, and David was about to lose his chance forever. "Next in line," the barista called out. David realized he was holding up the queue, but he couldn't move. He watched Lisa push open the door and step onto the sidewalk outside. His mind raced. Should he run after her? Should he let her go? What would he even say? "Hi, remember me? I'm that guy who used to be huge and barely talked to anyone except you?" That sounded ridiculous even in his own head. But something about this moment felt important, like the universe had put her in his path for a reason. After everything he had been through, all the changes he had made, Maybe this was meant to happen. The customer behind him cleared his throat impatiently. David stepped out of line and walked quickly toward the door. Through the glass, he could see Lisa about to cross the street. In a few seconds, she would disappear into the morning crowd and he might never see her again. His hand touched the door handle. This was it. He could either stay safe in his new anonymous life, or he could take a risk and reveal himself to someone from his past, someone who had mattered to him when he felt like he didn't matter to anyone. David thought about the man he used to be, scared, hiding, convinced he wasn't worth anyone's time. Then he thought about the man he had become, confident, strong, willing to take chances. The old David would have let her walk away. The new David knew he had to try. He pushed open the door and stepped onto the sidewalk. Lisa was waiting for the light to change, just 20 feet away from him. She had no idea that someone she once knew was about to change both of their days forever. "Excuse me," David called out, his voice stronger than he expected. "Lisa?" She turned around, her expression polite but confused. She was looking at him like she was trying to place where she might know him from. The light changed, but she didn't cross the street. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the way she used to do when she was thinking about something at work. This was the moment everything would change. Lisa stopped walking and turned around completely. Her eyebrows were raised in that polite way people do when they're trying to remember where they know someone from. She took a small step closer, her head tilted to one side like she was solving a puzzle. "I'm sorry," she said with a gentle smile. "Do we know each other? You seem familiar, but I can't quite place it." David felt his heart hammering in his chest. This was harder than he thought it would be. Standing there on the busy sidewalk with people walking around them, car horns honking in the background, he suddenly felt like that scared person he used to be. But he had come this far. He couldn't back down now. "We worked together," David said, trying to keep his voice steady, "at Henderson and Associates, about 3 years ago." Lisa's expression didn't change. She was clearly searching her memory, but nothing was clicking. David could see her mentally going through all the people she remembered from that office. The problem was the person she remembered looked nothing like the man standing in front of her now. "Henderson and Associates," she repeated slowly. "I remember that place well. But I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. What department were you in?" "Accounting," David said. "I sat in the back corner near the window that looked out at the parking garage. You used to stop by my desk sometimes. We talked about your cat, Mr. Whiskers." Something flickered in Lisa's eyes at the mention of her cat's name, but it was more confusion than recognition. She knew that only someone who really knew her would remember that detail, but she still couldn't connect it to the person in front of her. "Mr. Whiskers," she said softly. "You're right. I did talk about him at work. But I'm really sorry. I just can't." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "This is so awkward. I pride myself on remembering people, and you clearly remember me very well." David took a deep breath. He had to give her more to work with. "You invited me to lunch once," he continued. "It was a Friday, and everyone was going to that Italian place down the street. I was planning to eat at my desk like always, but you came over and asked if I wanted to join. I was so surprised that I almost said no." Lisa's expression shifted slightly. He could tell she was really trying now, digging deeper into her memories. But the person she was remembering and the person standing in front of her were like two different people entirely. "I do remember inviting someone to lunch," she said slowly. "Someone who seemed lonely. But he was—" She stopped herself, probably realizing it would be rude to describe what the person looked like. "He was a lot bigger than me," David finished for her. "A lot heavier, quiet, kept to himself most of the time." Lisa's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, exactly. He was very sweet, but so shy. We only talked a few times, but I always felt like there was more to him than he let people see." She paused, studying David's face more carefully now. "But you're not... I mean, you don't look anything like..." Like the person you remember, David said with a small smile. I know. I've changed quite a bit. Lisa was staring at him now, really looking. But it was his body and his clothes and his overall appearance that had changed so dramatically. His face was thinner, sure, but faces can change a lot when someone loses weight. His voice was similar but more confident. His posture was completely different. What was his name? She asked quietly. The person I remember? David, he said simply. David Chen. The name hung in the air between them for a moment. Lisa's mouth opened slightly, and David could see her mind working, trying to make the connection, but still not quite getting there. David Chen, she repeated. He was always so polite. Always said please and thank you to everyone. He had this gentle way of talking, like he was afraid of bothering people. I still say please and thank you, David said. Some things don't change. Lisa shook her head in confusion. But David was. And you're. She gestured vaguely at him, still not putting the pieces together. David realized he was going to have to be more direct. All the physical changes, all the confidence, all the new clothes and posture were making it impossible for her to see past the surface to recognize the person underneath. Lisa, he said gently, look at my eyes. She had been looking at his face, but now she really focused on his eyes. David had always been told he had distinctive eyes, dark brown with little flecks of gold that showed up in the sunlight. They were the one thing about him that hadn't changed at all. Really look, he said again, not at everything else. Just my eyes. Lisa stared directly into his eyes for what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds. David held her gaze, letting her see past all the changes to the one thing that had stayed exactly the same, and then it happened. He saw the exact moment when recognition hit her. Her eyes went from confused to shocked to completely amazed in the span of a heartbeat. Her hand flew up to cover her mouth, and she actually took a step backward, like she needed physical space to process what she was seeing. Oh my God, she whispered through her fingers. David? David Chen? Hi, Lisa, David said with a real smile now. It's me. Lisa's hand was still over her mouth, and her eyes were wide with disbelief. She looked him up and down, then back at his eyes, then up and down again like she was trying to make sure she wasn't imagining things. I can't believe it, she said, finally lowering her hand. David, what happened to you? You look amazing. I mean, you look like a completely different person. I am a completely different person, David said. In some ways, but in other ways, I'm exactly the same. Lisa was still staring at him in wonder. Your eyes, she said softly. That's how I finally knew it was you. Everything else is so different. But your eyes are exactly the same. People were walking around them on the sidewalk, but neither of them seemed to notice. They were locked in this bubble of recognition and amazement, 3 years of time collapsing into a single moment on a busy Tuesday morning. We need to sit down, Lisa said, still looking at David like she couldn't quite believe her eyes. I mean, if you have time, I have so many questions. David checked his watch. He had been planning to go straight to work after getting his coffee, but this felt more important than any meeting he had that day. I have time, he said. Let's go back inside. They found a quiet table in the corner of the coffee shop, away from the morning rush. Lisa sat across from David, studying his face like she was memorizing it. She kept shaking her head in amazement. I'm sorry for staring, she said with a laugh. It's just that you look so different. I mean, completely different. If it wasn't for your eyes, I never would have known it was you. David smiled. I get that a lot these days. People from my old life don't recognize me at all. Sometimes I wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Tell me everything, Lisa said, leaning forward. What happened? How did you... you look incredible. You look healthy and happy and confident. You're like a whole new person. David took a sip of his coffee, and thought about where to start. The story was long and complicated, but he wanted to share it with her. Somehow it felt important that she understood what he had been through. It started about 2 years ago, he began. I went to the doctor for a routine checkup, but it turned out to be anything but routine. My blood pressure was through the roof, my cholesterol levels were dangerous, and my doctor told me I was heading for a heart attack before I turned 35. Lisa's expression grew serious. Oh my goodness, David, that must have been terrifying. It was, David admitted, but it was also the wake-up call I needed. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. She told me that if I didn't make major changes immediately, I might not live to see 40. That night I went home and really looked at myself for the first time in years. I realized I wasn't just overweight. I was slowly killing myself. He told her about those first few months, how hard it was to change habits he had carried for most of his adult life, how he started by just walking around the block once a day, even though it left him breathless, how he threw out all the junk food in his apartment and learned to cook real meals. The physical part was hard, David continued, but the mental part was even harder. I had to learn to believe that I was worth the effort. For years I had convinced myself that this was just who I was supposed to be. The big guy in the corner, who nobody really noticed. Lisa's eyes were getting teary. David, I noticed you. I always thought you were so sweet and kind. I wished you would talk more because whenever you did say something, it was always thoughtful or funny. Really? David asked. I always felt invisible back then, except when I was talking to you. You were one of the few people who made me feel like I actually existed. Is that why you left the company? Lisa asked. I wondered what happened to you. One day you were just gone. David nodded. I needed a fresh start. The old environment reminded me too much of who I used to be. I was afraid that if I stayed, I would slip back into old patterns. So I found a new job, new apartment, basically started my whole life over. He told her about the support groups he joined, the therapy sessions that helped him understand why he had used food as a way to cope with loneliness and stress. He talked about the small victories, the first time he could run a mile without stopping, the day he fit into a regular-sized shirt, the moment he realized he was no longer afraid to make eye contact with people. It took about 18 months to lose most of the weight, David explained. But the real transformation took longer. Learning to see myself as someone worthy of love and respect. That was the hardest part. Lisa wiped at her eyes with a napkin. I'm so proud of you. I can't imagine how much courage it took to change your entire life like that. You helped, David said quietly. Even though you probably don't remember, the way you treated me back then planted seeds. You showed me that maybe I was worth talking to, worth including. Those small kindnesses meant more than you'll ever know. I do remember, Lisa said. I remember thinking that you seemed lonely and that everyone deserves to feel included. But I had no idea it meant so much to you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the weight of the conversation. The coffee shop had gotten quieter as the morning rush ended, and David felt like they were in their own little world. Can I ask you something personal? Lisa said. Do you ever miss who you used to be? I mean, people treat you so differently now, don't they? David thought about her question carefully. Yes, people treat me differently. Waiters smile at me now. Salespeople are helpful instead of dismissive. Strangers make small talk with me. In elevators, it's nice, but it also makes me sad sometimes. Sad? Because it means that all those years people were judging me based on how I looked instead of who I was inside. The same personality that people ignored before is suddenly interesting now. It makes you realize how shallow the world can be. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. That must be really hard to deal with. It is, but it's also taught me to be more aware of how I treat other people. I try to look beyond the surface now because I know what it feels like to be invisible. They talked for another hour, covering everything from his new job to her recent promotion, from his hiking adventures to her cat's latest shenanigans. It felt natural and easy, like no time had passed at all. Finally, Lisa looked at her phone and sighed. I really need to get to work. But David, I'm so glad we ran into each other. This has been, wow, just incredible. I'm glad too, David said. I wasn't sure if I should approach you or not. I'm really happy I did. As they stood up from the table, Lisa hesitated for a moment. Would you maybe want to get dinner sometime? I'd love to catch up more, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. David felt his heart skip a beat. I'd really like that. They exchanged phone numbers, and as they walked toward the door together, David felt like his life was about to take another unexpected turn. 3 months had passed since that morning in the coffee shop, and David's life had changed in ways he never expected. What started as a chance encounter had grown into something beautiful and real. Their first dinner together had been at a small Italian restaurant downtown. David had been nervous, worried that maybe their connection in the coffee shop had been just a moment of shock and curiosity on Lisa's part. But as soon as they sat down, the conversation flowed just like it had that morning. Lisa had asked more questions about his journey, and David found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He told her about the hardest days when he wanted to give up and go back to his old habits. He shared the victories too, like the first time someone asked him for directions on the street, treating him like a normal person instead of someone to avoid. The strangest part, David had said over his pasta, was learning to take up space again. For so long I tried to make myself invisible. Now I have to remember that it's okay to exist, to have opinions, to take up room in the world. Lisa had listened with such genuine interest and care. She asked thoughtful questions and shared her own struggles with confidence and self-worth. David realized that everyone had battles, even people who seemed to have it all figured out on the outside. That first dinner led to another, then weekend coffee dates, then long walks in the park where they talked about everything and nothing. David discovered that Lisa was even more wonderful than he had remembered. She was funny and smart, but also kind and genuine in a way that felt rare. What surprised him most was how comfortable he felt around her. With other people, David sometimes felt like he was performing, like he had to prove that he deserved to be treated well. But with Lisa, he could just be himself, both the person he used to be and the person he had become. They started spending more time together. Lisa came to his apartment and was amazed by how different his lifestyle was now. His refrigerator was full of fresh vegetables and healthy proteins. His living room had exercise equipment instead of a giant couch that took up half the space. The whole place felt light and airy, like someone who actually enjoyed living there. I love what you've done with this place, Lisa had said, running her fingers along his bookshelf. It feels so positive and energetic. It should, David had replied. This apartment is where I learned to like myself again. Lisa had turned to look at him then, and something in her expression made his heart skip. I always liked you, she said softly. Even back then, I just wished you could see what I saw. That was the night David realized his feelings for Lisa weren't just leftover emotions from their past. This was something new and real, based on who they both were now. Their relationship grew slowly and naturally. Lisa met his hiking group and fit right in with his new friends. David started joining her for trivia nights with her co-workers, where his quiet intelligence proved surprisingly useful. They found a rhythm that worked for both of them. David's confidence continued to grow, not just because he looked different, but because someone he cared about truly saw him and chose to be with him. Lisa never made him feel like a project or someone she was trying to fix. She loved him for who he was, transformation and all. One evening, they were walking through the same neighborhood where David used to struggle just to make it around the block. Now they were walking for miles, talking and laughing as the sun set behind them. Can I tell you something? Lisa said, stopping near a bench under a streetlight. Of course, David replied, taking her hand. That day in the coffee shop when I finally recognized your eyes, it wasn't just because they looked familiar. It was because they looked happy. Back at our old job, your eyes always seemed so sad even when you were smiling. But that morning, they were bright and full of life. That's what made me realize who you were. David felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. You saw all of that in just a moment? I did, Lisa said, and I knew right then that whatever journey you had been on, it had been worth it, not because you look different now, but because you found yourself. 6 months after their reunion, David was preparing for another surprise. He had bought a ring and planned to propose to Lisa in the same coffee shop where she had first recognized his eyes. It felt like the perfect place to start their next chapter together. The morning of the proposal, David stood in front of his bathroom mirror, just like he had so many times during his transformation. But this time, he wasn't looking for who he used to be or trying to accept who he had become. He was looking at who he was now, someone who was worthy of love, someone who had worked hard to become the best version of himself, someone who was ready to share his life with another person. As he got dressed, David thought about everything that had led to this moment. The scary doctor's visit that forced him to change, the months of hard work and small victories, the day he decided to approach Lisa on the street instead of letting her walk away. All of it had been leading to this. He picked up the small velvet box from his dresser and smiled at his reflection. The man looking back at him wasn't the scared, invisible person he used to be, but he also wasn't trying to be someone completely different. He was exactly who he was meant to be. David Chen, someone who had learned that transformation isn't about becoming a different person, but about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Later that morning, as he walked toward the coffee shop where his new life had really begun, David felt grateful for every step of his journey. The hard parts had been necessary, the struggles had made him stronger, and the love he had found with Lisa was sweeter because he finally believed he deserved it. He pushed open the glass door, hearing that familiar little bell chime above his head. Today felt like the beginning of everything. As he spotted Lisa at their usual table by the window, her face lighting up when she saw him, David knew that some transformations never really end. They just keep getting better.